Hello, troops. Start in the United States of America, Wonk blog. In August, Republicans scored what they thought was a big win by persuading Democrats to accept a trigger that consisted of only spending cuts. The price they paid was, 1. Concentrating the cuts on the Pentagon while exempting Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare beneficiaries, and 2. Delaying the cuts until January the 1st, 2013. That was, they figured, a win as it eschewed taxes. Grover Norquist's pledge was unbroken. But 12 years earlier, George W. Bush had set a trigger of his own in order to pass his tax cuts using a 51-vote budget reconciliation process. Are you keeping up with this? He had agreed to let them sunset in 2010. A last-minute deal extended them until the end of 2012. So now there are 2 triggers. One is an extremely progressive spending trigger worth $1.2 trillion that goes off January the 1st, 2013. The other, an extremely progressive tax trigger worth $3.8 trillion that goes off January the 1st, 2013. If you count reduced interest payments, the 2 policies alone would reduce future deficits by about $6 trillion. That's far more than anything the Super Committee came close to discussing. It's distributed far more progressively than anything the Democrats would have even considered proposing. And all that needs to happen for it to pass is, well, absolutely nothing. And Republicans can't stop these triggers on their own. They need Senate Democrats, etc., 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 and they're not going to get them, are they? Tricky, tricky. Hard to calculate all these games that they're playing. Okay, United States of America, gross domestic income, an alternative gauge of economic output to gross domestic product, shows the US at near standstill, and that little chart shows the little red bars going down and down and down, and that's gross domestic income. And the implication here is that the GDP is probably being overstated at the moment because that gross domestic income is going down, and there's really no way gross domestic product will be going up with gross domestic income going down. Barry Ritholtz, still wonderful blogging. A majority of Americans, including both OWS and the Tea Party, agree on the most important issues. We just don't realise it. And the main one right at the top there is no more bailouts. As I've noted since 2008, Americans are united in their overwhelming disapproval of bailouts to the big banks. And he goes on to quote all the polls saying how many of the people of America are against bank bailouts. Now, Barry knows how tricky that is. Don't bail out banks and you're asking for trouble, but obviously bail out banks and you're demanding trouble. CNBC has the bank run begun on Europe. The important thing here is money market funds. And Fitch estimates the US money market funds have withdrawn 42% of their money from European banks in general, 69% from France. Now, it's the American money market funds that fund the short-term funding of the European banks. Banks are inherently dangerous because they do short-term funding. They borrow short-term and lend long-term. So if there's a problem, the money isn't there. Never is there. I'll leave it there. Bloomberg, European banks get false deleveraging, seller finance deals. You know they've got to get the capital ratios adjusted, and to do so they're selling assets. They're finding, let's just do the first paragraph, European banks vowing to sell distressed assets as regulators tighten capital requirements, are lending money to buyers to get deals done. Now, in the second paragraph, there's an example. Royal Bank of Scotland lending Blackstone the money, I'll just paraphrase it, the money to buy the assets off Royal Bank of Scotland's books. It's not all the money, but it's a great chunk of the money to give, so Blackstone get a good deal on it. And it's not just Royal Bank of Scotland and Blackstone, and it's not just the UK, it's across Europe. The banks are lending the money to the purchasers, so the purchasers can buy the assets off the bank's books. Can't see anything wrong with that, can you? No, far too tricky. Eurozone manufacturing PMI was out yesterday, third month on the row. It has gone down. ECB securities held for monetary policy purposes. In other words, ECB buying Italian, Spanish, assorted peripheral bonds started in the summer, in late July, early August, and as you can see, on the up and up. It was around 100 and now it's about 250. That's the central bank in the room still looking after the children, and there's absolutely no sign at all of the parents coming home. There was a lot of panic and fuss about a German bond that didn't sell very well yesterday. This chart shows that it's not terrifically rare for German bonds not to sell very well. The different coloured dots there are the 2s, 5s, 10s, etc., the different bonds. Up top right in a box are the black blobs, which are the 10-year bonds, which in 2008 to 2009 they often had trouble getting those all sold, and 30-35% were unsold back then. But it's not a particularly strange thing for the German bonds to go unsold, although yesterday was more, and at completely the wrong time to be not selling them. It sent a bad signal around the world. German coalition may be open to Eurozone bonds. What we have here is the German politicians saying we are open to joint and several bonds as long as, this is the important thing, joint and several bonds, Euro bonds, as long as it's bargaining. It's what politicians do. First, we want this, this and this, which is we want fiscal rules, and we want to be able to absolutely and totally be sure that these fiscal rules are followed before we can consider, or we'll write in, we will accept the joint and several bonds as long as we get this. The horse trading has begun, and that's what the politicians are doing because that's what they're good at. But in the background, the financial crisis is swirling and whirling out of control. This is the last one. Alphaville, Ireland seeks EU help over bank bailout. If you read into this, it's political manoeuvring again. What we've got is the either 17 or 27 members of the either Eurozone or EU have got to sign up to these new treaty changes for these strict controls and controlling mechanisms for the euro finances that Germany will demand before they agree to joint and several bonds. So signatures are needed. So horse trading is going on, and just first up, or one of the first to be noticed, is Ireland, which is basically saying, well, we might sign up to that as long as you help us with, because we've done awful well up to now, but we'd really like a bit of help and haircut our bonds for us. In other words, pay us money and we might sign up. And there's going to be 17 or 27 different demands, all to be balanced and horse traded before anything is done. And as I say, In the meanwhile, the banks are blowing up. Happy days. Bye.